Welcome to the next episode on software modernisation. I'm Amelia, Regional Director for Codurance UK North, and I'm joined by Sandro and Mash, who are the co-founders of Codurance, and Jose, who is our MD from Spain. So in this episode, we're discussing impediments and challenges to software modernisation. So we're going to help bring these challenges to life, and I'm going to ask a few questions, and we're going to help identify the common problems that organizations face when they start looking into or executing on a software modernization initiative. So I'm going to open the questions up very broadly with why is it that software modernization can prove so difficult with so many challenges? So I'll start with Jose and see if you can bring those to life.
Well, that's a really good question, because the way that I see it, software modernization is about changing a system. So it's not just technology that you are affecting. And this is one of the reasons why I feel it's so difficult, because there are so many moving parts, relationships between those parts that you may not even know about, right? And as soon as you start pulling the thread, then things start unraveling and you start finding out new information, and you need to adapt, right? And doing all of that at an organizational level, which is a lot of the times where you want to focus. You don't want to optimize for a particular part, but you want to help the business as a whole. Well, that's difficult. The complexity goes beyond what one person most likely can do on its own, right? And coordinating all of these things and having people collaborate to solve and tackle these challenges in all of the different areas is, well, in itself a challenge.
Modernization, by definition, is what we kind of term refactoring at at all levels. And so your features or your product almost remains still while you are making the structures, organizational process, technology, those structures, you're making them better so that you will deliver faster, that the future changes will be faster. So you're saying, okay, make this investment, which is going to have an indirect impact in your business, but it's very difficult to then say it's very difficult to put kind of money on that, put the value on that. And that's where I think the challenges or the difficult comes on the buy-in side.
I'll pick in two things that you both mentioned. Like one, Mesh, you use almost like a refactoring at an organizational level. Mm-hmm. Jose, you also mentioned about like multiple threads, right? You start going in one place and then say, oh, we need to change these, but we also need to change that and change that. So for me, like one of the things that is a bit scary sometimes is similar to a refactoring at much lower levels. Like, how far do you go with that? So you are working on that small piece of work and that small piece of code and say, okay, I don't like that, or this could be better, or it's not well tested, or so on and so forth. But then you need to change that one, and everything else is connected, and that one, and the UI, and the database, and stuff. So in a modernization, this is in a much larger scale, right? So, okay, how do you draw those boundaries? Is it just this system, or this area of this system, or these systems, right? Or do we need to break silos? So where do you draw the line? So for me, this is what is scary sometimes. It's like, we don't want to change everything. We don't want to start from scratch again. So I think that make sure that we focus. I think you mentioned also, Jose, in terms of focus, if we are able to focus and draw that lines, it becomes a little bit less scary. But this is one of the challenges of drawing those boundaries. And right.
One thing also there is that you need to consider that the way that the organization grows is sort of like looking for stability, right? Like as you grow, part of what you're looking for is to make things repeatable, right? Like you want consistency in how you're running the business. And this sort of leads you to create structures that provide that stability. So when you're talking about modernizing, you're talking about changing things that are very stable, that they were made, let's say, not to change a lot, right? And that happens at all levels, right? Like before we mentioned a couple of the technology people, but it's also, in the ideas part, right? Like the mindset is also one of those things, because it's not written anywhere, right? Like it's not something that you just go somewhere, redefine it, and it's a shared kind of understanding, and that also needs to evolve when you're addressing some of these things. So it's really, that aspect also is quite important, I would say.
Actually, this goes back to what Jose talked about. The structures are stable, right? And what we are talking about is, in a way, restructuring at different levels. And one thing that happens with structure is that certain parts of your capability become stronger because that's where change is happening. And other parts where the structure is holding things in place, your capabilities get weaker. So suddenly what happens is that you're trying to change the structures and you start relying on capabilities that are actually weaker, right? So, you've not had to think at that holistic scale. You're making the next set of changes and so on. You not had to change the teams or rejuggle them if they needed, or change the way you are releasing the software, or even at the code level, kind of restructure at a more fundamental place, and all that you've not had to do. So suddenly things do become very, very scary, because you're not confident, and maybe you don't actually have those skills at the level of strength that you maybe have the others at, which you were using a lot more. So yeah, it's kind of related to that structure. As structure changes, or as you are trying to change the structure, different kind of skills are needed, which maybe you no longer have at the level that you need, right?
So what are the common challenges and types of problems faced by organizations to kind of like bring that to life at the next level of detail?
Yeah, so for example, one thing that is very common, and by the way, like this happens to us as well, right? So every time that I'm a bit uncertain, oh, we don't have the time, we don't have the money, because that's the way that you push that further. So okay, like, what, I don't want to do that now, no time, no money. But we need to think a little bit deeper than that. So that is normally one big impediment. We don't have the time or the money. But then it's like, okay, but how much time and money we are talking about? And also why don't we have the time? And where are we spending the money? Because there are places that we are spending money for inefficiencies, for example, that maybe if we reduce those inefficiencies, we probably would have more time and more money to actually focus on other things. So time and money is normally a constraint, and an extremely valid constraint. And sometimes to address that constraint, you need an investment in a specific place so that that stops being a constraint.
A while back, we used to have this kind of, especially when automated testing development, those kind of things came in, or unit testing at least, people used to say, like, you'd kind of do your backlog refinement and you'd have write the feature and write the test in two different tasks, right? And suddenly someone say, like, the write the test tasks would drop because you're all too busy writing the features. And then we were trying to kind of tell people that actually this is an atomic piece of work. Writing the verification of what you are building is part of what you are building. It's not aside from it, right? And this, I think, modernization or transformation is almost an extension of that. It is not aside from it. So what's happened is that we've kept that aside. As we are building, as we are adding more features to our products, our applications, modernization needs to happen as we go along. It should be an atomic part of your work. But because that's not been done for a very long time, you have this huge amount of backlog of modernization or technical debt or whatever else you want to call it, right? And when you kick off a modernization initiative, what it's trying to do is to kind of bring you back to the point where you can then, in a sustainable way, carry out the transformation, because you are way behind and you're trying to catch up. So you need to catch up so you can then carry on doing it, because it is a continuous process. You don't do the modernization and stop and go back to building features. You kind of get yourself to a point where it then becomes atomic to the rest of your software development effort.
There is an aspect of tying things up to, let's say, strategic goals, right? Like something that is happening right now. Now there's this meme going around about, who's leading the digital transformation in your organization, right? And one of the options is COVID-19. Right? And digital transformation and all these things are things that have been in the CEO, CXO agenda for a very long time now. This is not a new subject, no, but somehow we never get to it, right? Until it becomes strategic, or at least the sense of urgency is high enough so that people actually start paying attention. And we're under a pandemic now, right? So it is very urgent. It has impacted every aspect of civilization in general, no? So of course businesses are being affected and are having to adapt, because it's completely disrupting the way things are done. But we don't need a pandemic in order to be able to realize that. And something that I find lacking sometimes is that connection between what it is that you're trying to achieve as a business at the strategic level, and how your modernization effort supports that or prepares you to get there, and also how to organize that in a way in which it will allow you to get return on your investment as you're doing it, right? Because you tend to see these things as kind of like a big bang release. No, it's like, oh, when we move to the cloud, right? But there are many. What people fail to realize is that there are many intermediate goals and steps that are very achievable, that are very manageable, and that already move you in that direction. And planning for that ROI, planning for that smaller steps that are easy to assimilate by the organization, etc., is a key aspect of actually starting that journey, because it is a journey. It's not gonna end, right? Like there will always be things to modernize, but you need to start somewhere, right?
Quite often we have technical people that understands that things are not very well, that are not going very well, there are loads of problems that they are dealing with on a daily basis, and for them it's like, how can we convince the business, right? So, and this is the same argument, but on a much larger scale that we used for convincing about TDD and pair programming and things like that. So and as you were saying, Jose, for me, if you want to push a modernization program like that, you need to be able to speak business, because like you don't get this kind of investment because you want to do microservices or because you want to use AWS. So that is the wrong argument, right? So, and this is precisely what I was advising developers in the past. It's like saying that you want to do TDD because you like TDD is the wrong argument, right? Because there's no, what is the business value? Because those things are a means to an end. I always said, like, all the extreme programming practices and agile methodologies and stuff, those are means to an end. And if you want to push those to drive technical change, the end needs to be a business impact.
The business impact is so difficult to quantify often in these cases, right? And you are actually, because often what you are saying is that I'm going to do this effort so that your capability to deliver is better, right? And then, so the proof in the pudding would be that, when your capability to deliver gets better, but sometimes you are at a place where that distance you need to travel in order to start showing this improvement or start moving the needle in the business value side of things, it's actually quite far away.
Yeah.
And, I hear you, Jose, when you said you can do smaller steps and you can provide value to the business. And that's very true. But even those small steps sometimes are not small enough for you to be able to then actually get the buy-in.
Yeah.
Right. And I think this is also where part of it is to do with understanding what good looks like. Saying, the first thing is that you need to admit that you have a problem, right? So it's the first step to solving the problem. Then, because the problem is so complex, you need to then do a lot of problem analysis and break it down and say, what are all the different problems that I have? And then prioritizing those problems to get to the problem that you're trying to solve. And then getting to then you start talking about the solution to that problem, right? And I think we kind of miss all that whole journey and go straight to the solution, right?
I think the co-creation is a great articulation of the synergy you want to see to kind of take it forward. Definitely some of the themes coming through, are around the need to take everyone on the journey with you. And it's not just kind of at that low technology level, it's everyone from across the organization that potentially has their own view of the problem. And it's about that kind of collaboration and co-creation going forward. So that's a really interesting point. I think there's some really good points there on, the problems at the holistic view and then at the lower level faced when looking at software modernization. The great news is that we have in the next episode, we look at how we can face into those challenges and look at framing them and breaking them down. I feel there'll be some really, really good things to take us forward and to build on the conversation today around the challenges, around that articulation of value, particularly, and taking everyone on the journey collaboratively with us. So that'll be a great lead into the next episode. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.